We'll be back from the break. It's exactly 1 minute past 8. Still driving your business here on your daily Kickstarter. That is SMART24 Business. Well, at this very time, quite a very calming up business discussions. But of course, before we get in there, don't forget to buy stocks, government bonds and securities on Zabo platform, a platform from Alltex, which enables you to be able to attain the company securities and stocks. Now, what you need to do to be a part of this, just there, START292 hash. Yes, that is the USSD code, which will enable you to have access to quite lots of options of government bonds for just as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. But you can still choose to invest more than that. But Zabo simply says start with 15,000 to make life much more easy and friendly. Now, the market's open at 8:15. As I speak right now, just 14 minutes left. And they close at 3:15 p.m. East African time, effective Monday up to Friday, except on the weekends and the public holidays when you can access these markets. Now, Zabo made this a reality. Zabo says, my money, my future. And Alltex East Africa says, do something new. Well, at this very time, let's get straight into our business tips and quotes. Of course, as you get inspired as a young entrepreneur. Well, of course, that is it regarding the business tips and quotes. Hope definitely you've been inspired in there. Well, now let's cross over and take a look at what's trending. That is on social media and having some element of business in it. Well, this is at MBU, of course, saying that following the repealing of the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic, that is Substances Control Act 2015, the sale and use of marijuana, Mira, among others, drugs is now legal in Uganda. Then this is at Nalau 256. Of course, the Constitutional Court has nullified the whole Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act 2016, and it's now legal to trade marijuana, yes, Mira and other substances in Uganda. And now this is at Sound Exponent, of course, saying that Uganda's Constitutional Court has nullified the affirmations, the infamous, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Act 2016, citing, among other reasons, lack of quorum in Parliament, violating, provisions of the Ugandan laws. Now this is at Tuhainwe. It says, in enacting a law without quorum, of course, directing it towards the Parliament, has led, that is, to various aspects here. Now, still further here, we see that Mira, its annulment, that sets back by miles any positive efforts that have been made in this regard. Then secondly, from an academic perspective, the petitioners had alleged that Parliament passed a law which wasn't appropriate. Now, use of marijuana and Mira now legal in Uganda after court nullifies, that is narcotics law. Now, the act banned the sale of the use of several narcotic drugs. Court ruled that the manner in which the entire law was enacted was illegal, and the only remedy was repealing it. And this is at Africa Tembelea. Says in his ruling on May 5th, Justice Muzamiru Mutangula Kibedi of the Constitutional Court declared the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Act 2015 null and void because it had passed without the requirement of quorum of 1/3. And then at Miracle 5.1 says the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Health, Uganda, that is Dr. Diana Atwini, has vowed to retable the law against the use of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances in Uganda following the country's nullification of the law last week. Right now, as we are observing those particular aspects regarding the narcotics, of course, in the country, Uganda. And of course, we need to get to understand that Uganda's constitutional court, that is, repealed the country's Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Act, that is of 2015, which, among other things, prohibited, that is, the sale and the use of several narcotic drugs, that is, in the country. And this follows a 2017 petition, of course, by the court, by farmers growing Mira under the umbrella body, that is under their umbrella body, that is Wakiso Mira Growers and Dealers Association Limited at the same time. Now, Muzamiru, Uganda's Justice, that is Muzamiru Mutangula Kibedi, said in his judgment, where he said that I would declare the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Act 2015 null and void, of course, due to lack of quorum on the part of the Parliament. And of course, contrary to Articles 88 and 89 of the Constitution and Rule 23 of the Rules of the Procedure of the 9th Parliament. And of course, 2012 made pursuant to Articles 88 and 94 of the Constitution. Of course, these are statements from Uganda's Justice Muzamiru Kibedi, saying in his judgment about this very matter. Well, at this very time, I'm joined with Joram Paul Sonko to have, of course, just have a discussion regarding the narcotics in Uganda, as we see, quite lots of aspects being put there. Well, good morning, Joram, and welcome to the show.
Yes, good morning. It's a Thursday that doesn't seem to be one with a lot of energy and vibe, but I would say still the business world has to adapt to everything. Well, speaking of this issue to do with narcotic drugs, first of all, you get to realize that the Mira farmers are likely to win.
To win this,
it's a win for the Mira farmers in the country here.
Okay.
Because when you look at, for example, countries like Kenya, where Mira farmers have a ready market for their goods in Somalia and Ethiopia, name all those countries around. You look at the fact that after the Uganda Constitutional Court on Friday repealing the country's narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, I think, first of all, with the social media trends, they were clearly showing you how excited some Ugandans were in the same matter and why the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Health, that is Dr. Atwini, who is likely to table a bill in Parliament against this ruling of the Constitutional Court. And of course, this is something that what the Constitutional Court repealed was, like you've been mentioning here, it was actually prohibiting, among others, the sale and the use of several narcotic drugs in the country.
Very true.
And following a 2017 petition to the court, this 2017 petition was made by the farmers of Miraa at the time, or those who actually grow Miraa or cut under the umbrella body. The one Andrew has actually ideally mentioned here. So it has taken all these years for the Constitutional Court to look through and ideally get it done. Now, the decision to ban the use of Miraa, which at times was highlighted as inconsistently having principles of illegalities, or you should say there was a lot of
recreational,
in the same misuse of the drug itself and everything, and how people used to use it. So the farmers, in their contest, they were actually contesting about the manner in which the law prohibited its cultivation, and not only the cultivation but also the possession and consumption. Because to the farmers, the Miraa farmers themselves, they feel like this is part of the agricultural sector. So that means at times theirs is to grow. And then they don't know how people misuse it. Misusing is up to the people, but, but for them they do grow, distribute and sell to earn a living. But of course, according to the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Health, the reason behind the entire thing, the reason as to why she wants to go out there and table a bill against this ruling is simply because of the fact that this may likely lead to the misuse of drugs in the element of the court ruled in favor. So this is where you get to realize. And of course, besides that, according to the Uganda Justice Muzamiru Chibedi, who said that the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 2015, according to the ruling, is now null and void because it lacks quorum on the part of Parliament, contrary to the Articles 88 and 89 of the Constitution. Now, also, when you come to think of it as well, according to the ruling, the stage of voting, any bill must receive the sufficient number of votes in order for it to be lawfully passed. So it was, of course, ruled by the court, but now in Parliament, they have to, to vote, the number of votes have to ideally go on the side of what the court has ruled before it is actually sent to the president to pass it into law. So once the president does pass it into law, then the Miraa farmers will be very, very much excited. But of course, as we do know so far now, is that according to the interpretation on social media, they do feel like since the court has accepted it, we're good to go. But by the look of things now, this is a very huge discussion for anyone out there.
And it was very interesting that there was also the aspect of marijuana rotating around that, the use of marijuana. And I was saying that because looking at the other side of the commercial aspect, we've seen countries in Africa that have really embraced this. Marijuana, and there's what they call cannabis as some sort of potential, economic avenues, resource avenues. Taking a look at Rwanda, I think in 2019, that's when they legalized the growth, but from the perspective that it's for production purposes, pharmacies and all this, not for recreational use. The countries like Morocco, Lesotho, Malawi, Zimbabwe. And it's quite actually a big market out there in the entire globe. And as Africa, we contribute about 10%. That's according to the report of 2020. 10% of the marijuana and cannabis, and of course the North America coming in with about 40% the market. So, but it shows you that at least we have a potential market share. Even in Uganda in 2019, actually secured cannabis seeds. From, I think it was actually backed by the European Union. As I take a look at a report, the Ugandan government spent over 264,000 to secure high quality cannabis seeds in 2019, and they also secured buyers from Germany. and Canada after getting approval from the European Union. That was in 2019. So you can see ideally how this turns out, despite all this. Maybe the only challenge is just the misuse of it, but that is something which is quite unavoidable. It's unavoidable, definitely. Maybe what we can...
I think it's unavoidable in the context of the fact that it's misinterpreted.
Exactly.
Because according to what the police stated in a statement is, that was on Monday, that they are going to continue arresting anyone found culpable of drug offences, such as consumption and possession, in regards to the fact that once the drugs that you're consuming or that you are in possession with illegal under the National Drug Authority Act.
Okay.
So for them, according to police, not until there is a law that is passed, that means the bill being voted for in Parliament, President asserting it into law, then police is going to continue,
to enforce
the old laws. To enforce the old laws in respect of the act that was nullified, or what you could actually say, regardless of the nullification. And I think this takes us back to the conflicting loyalty that we are having as a country in regards to such kind of situations, whereby the Constitutional Court nullifies or passes out something, sends it back to Parliament. Now the discussion takes a huge time in Parliament. Now it leaves most of the masses who are excited but without a clue of what is really happening. Because on Friday, by the look of things on social media, everyone interpreted this differently.
Absolutely true.
You get to realize most of them interpreted it in a way that now Uganda has legally accepted the use of marijuana, has accepted the use of the sale of weed, all of this. Because this is the interpretation. The mere fact that they had of something to do with narcotics. So the entire focus was on how they're going to consume it now legally. Now, I think this is the same reason as to why the permanent secretary to the Ministry of Health wants to go in out there and, table it again, but this time around going against the ruling of the Constitutional Court. And of course, for the viewers out there, before we even go into what members of Parliament were actually saying in regards to the same matter, because this is something that is supposed to be passed by these particular policy makers before they have to debate about it, have discussions, vote for or against, then before the president comes in and takes the shape. So again, if you look at this, Section 47 prohibits possession without lawful excuse of any narcotic, drug or psychotropic substance under international control, while 49 prohibits the cultivation of plants yielding narcotics without the written consent of the minister. That's according to what the police spokesperson, Fred Enanga, revealed. But then again, you come to realize that according to the court, it does seem like it is lawful for the Mira farmers, for example, to grow this particular plant or cut, you could say. But besides that, members of Parliament had their own view on the same in regards to the drug, in regards to accepting the sale and possession of narcotic drugs specifics in the country.
All right, now let's get into these discussions, what the members of Parliament had to say regarding this.
We are currently observing kind of celebrations in most of parts of the Kampala, whereby there is a misjudgment of the Constitutional Court kind of a decision. So in protecting our youth and children, Right Honourable Speaker, wouldn't it be procedure right, as in Parliament, to reconsider reviewing such that we can put sanity in our youth?
Law, the NDA Act has provisions that can be able to be used to regulate. But leaving that aside, we already have a law which was brought by Honorable, the one of Aru, Komakech, in regard to the narcotics, and it will be brought this house. And this is what I've kept telling members. This was thrown out of court because of the quorum, basically quorum. Members of parliament are paid to come and sit in this house, whether you say nothing, so long as you are able to say yes. Now, the voters outside there, you're spending taxpayers' money, you're not in the house, the bills are being thrown out because of quorum. You can't even afford to come and sit here and just say the word yes or no. You get it? Let's be fair to Ugandans as members of parliament. And Ugandans should watch whichever members don't come to the house, they should watch, other than sending liabilities to the house all the time.
It should be information to each and everyone that last week, of course, the Constitutional Court declared null and void the Narcotics, Drugs and Act, so whereby the basis was on parliamentary side, whereby quorum was not considered, and of course it contravened the Constitution of Uganda, and that was Article 88 and 89, and the rules of procedures. So whereby, of course, I was reminding the Speaker of Parliament that, of course, there is need and necessity of members of Parliament, of course, to reconsider and make a review such that, of course, we can give audience to that bill, such that it can pass today, whereby all members of Parliament, of course, can be mobilized in big numbers, whereby in the coming future, no or maybe none of the courts, of course, can give basis for the nullification of that bill, basing on the quorum, which was, of course, considered last week on 14th. And, of course, we have to give priority to our youth and the children, of course, to avoid their being very much wasted through the use of these drugs that, of course, have been a basis for violence and misconduct within our societies. So now we as members of Parliament, of course, it is our sole duty, of course, to put sanity in the public and community such that we can have law-abiding citizens.
An amendment to the Narcotic and Psychotropic Substance Act, majorly targeted to include in the schedule to add cat, which is Mairunji. That was the only additional, except it also added some tightening on the penalties. But the rest of other narcotic and psychotropic substances had already been banned in the earlier act. A literal interpretation of the judgment is that if you do away with an amended act, the other act still exists. It is not a total replacement. So therefore, the law exists. So the argument of whether there is absence of law is not right. But that is subject to proper reading of the judgment if we really set aside that whole act. But then also, so even with the law adopted as it were, cat, which is my law, would not have been automatically banned. Even now, when it was even still not yet nullified, Mairunji was being grown and traded without any impediment, simply because in the provision of implementation, we put a provision, personally I did, put a provision that the minister shall do so, the coming into force of that provision on issuance of a special statutory instrument, conditioned on one, government should have provided an alternative crop and should have also done due sensitization to the communities to be affected, which had never been done. So those were critical benchmarks for coming into force of this law. But also the other argument is, even if you bring back the law, it should be on record that now going forward, if Uganda has a future in the pharmaceutical industry and the drug production business, you cannot completely do away with the growing of for medical purposes of njaga. Because in all drugs, in most of them is a critical ingredient. Unless we are always going to be a colonial appendage in terms of drugs we use, definitely we need an amendment to give force for people who want to do industrial and medical growing of cannabis or njaga to be freely and to do so in a legal framework. And then we reinforce the regulations for use and the protection of the community for drug abuse. It goes without saying. And most states, that's what they do. Most governments, that's what they do. Because it's a business where you cannot legislate yourself out. So it is wrong to reason it the other way around.
Yes, that is Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Control Act 2015. And of course, we shall be getting to see how it really turns out to be. Maybe, Joran, before we get into the break, what would be your say about this legalizing this whole thing into the country?
Quite tricky, because I think one of our biggest weaknesses is interpretation. And how we interpret the law or how we interpret the ruling will definitely be either basing on our irrational or rational approach.
Very true.
On the same, because one thing is how do you relate to, are you accepting what the court has ruled in regards to your personal gains or in regards to what it's supposed to be? Because if the court says narcotic drugs,
it's okay.
It's okay to be sold, the narcotic drugs and everything. Police comes out and tells you. The issue is, no, we're not.
We're going to still arrest people.
We are going to still arrest people who contain this. Now, because when you look at police, cannabis is consistently been the mostly used drug, followed by cocaine in the country, illegally. Because when you look at this, and according to the National Drug Authority, these are illegal because they are harmful, and it affects both physical and mental health. We've got to realize it is not only affecting careers of people, crime, relationships. There's a lot it is actually tarnishing. By the look of things, when court nullified this, the very first excitement amongst the young people is the mere fact that now they can illegally use cocaine. So you want to realize it's a different kind of understanding of the same, and now it's going to leave us with a lot of questions.
It's a mystery.
You know, how are we going to deal with this? I think this is why the Minister of Health wants to first of all come through and make the directives very clear. And very honest, and candid. To the Ugandans to understand what next, what should be their worry, and why they shouldn't be really excited about this, and why we should not even go on with the Constitutional Court ruling. Of course, we don't know what will happen next. And of course, the discussions will have to continue in Parliament. But then, besides that, it's now going back to the fact that it's like people are now living in a no man's land in this kind of context, I should say. It's just like it is a free law which is now operating for them, not until Parliament comes out fully
and the president also.
The president asserts to the law. We are going to be finding it quite difficult, especially now police has to be on their toes to make sure that they continue tracking down those who are engaging in the constant use of cannabis and cocaine illegally.
All right, I don't know what you think. You can hit us on our social media handle regarding this very topic about the Narcotics and Psychotropic Substances Control Act 2015, getting to see whether this should actually be legalized in our country, Uganda. Well, now let's get into a short break. Definitely we shall be returning with further business discussions.